Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here. Hi, welcome to the podcast, What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and here today we have Kimberly with us. She is a therapist and offers support around infertility and loss. And really happy to have you here, Kimberly, to talk about your area of expertise and services. And if you'd like to just feel free to jump in and talk more about yourself.
Absolutely. No problem. I am so excited to be here because this is such a taboo topic naturally for ourselves as along with the political climate right now with things. And certainly infertility has becoming more and more in the forefront, but more and more people, they stay silent because 1 in 8 people do struggle with infertility at some capacity. And certainly it impacts us all one way or another. Either a loved one struggles with it and or a friend or a peer, someone is struggling with it in your life without a doubt. And if you're listening to this, probably you yourself. But yeah, I can go into my background a little bit. So, I am a licensed mental health counselor originally. My original license is from Indiana. I do have 7 licenses because I am a military spouse. So my other licenses are Florida, Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, Michigan, and now Louisiana for this winter. I am a telehealth provider, but kind of with that, with my background experience, a very broad scope of how I became to be, because if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would I be specializing this? I would have been telling you, hell no, I would not be specializing this. This is one of the most painful topics in my life. However, it's the most passionate topic in my life now that I'm I don't want to say I'm on the other side, but I'm certainly on the mend. Because infertility isn't something you just get rid of overnight. You're always going to be struggling infertility. Even if you get the end result that you want, you still have those underlying factors that made you infertile to begin with. So I started out in my master's program. We got forced to be grief counselors for a local org. And I was so upset that I had to be part of that. But however, I grew so much from it and I absolutely found I loved it. I loved doing grief and loss. I ended up becoming one of my main niches. Right from the get-go, I never left the org. I kept volunteering off and on for 4 years. And during that time, I was a children's therapist. But I came to a point for my own infertility struggles. I could no longer practice as a children's therapist in the school system. I absolutely could not practice just because I had my own triggers and it was really detrimental to my own mental health. But however, grief and loss was my thing. My husband joined the military at the same time. And so then I became a hospice counselor for 5 years. And I'm really grateful for that experience that I had. And I got to dive even further into my grief journey as a counselor and that expertise. We did eventually have our miracle children through several rounds of IVF during that time while towards the tail end of my hospice career. And that opened up windows of how can I give back? Because this is such a niche community and it's such a community where people are so kind and respectful with one another. And we're all kind of internally suffering. And how can I give back to this community? And so for the last 4.5 years, I've actually been a counselor doing third-party reproduction, so surrogates, egg donors, sperm donors, and helping people, intended parents, other folks that have struggled with infertility or same-sex couples that want the same dream of parenthood. And I love being part of their journeys with that expertise and knowledge from backhand experience of my own infertility journey, which would end up being a decade in total. and it's before we
Wow.
had our own children. Yes. And so now it's kind of fun how I just morphed from one thing to another as like dominoes effect with my career. And now I am definitely one of the experts in infertility, for sure, from my own background experience and unique experience being a grief and loss therapist, because a lot of people don't realize how much grief goes into infertility. Grief is hand in hand and like besties with infertility as a whole. So, I mean, I have a very unique perspective, and especially in the world of infertility and the orgs within them, definitely very integrated in that community. So my private practice does focus a lot on grief and loss, of course, since that is one of my main specialties, but however, also infertility. And I see couples as well as individuals. And I'm starting to get my sex therapy certification just because so many couples struggle in infertility being intimate. And I think it's one of the most underrated things that people don't understand especially when we're going through infertility and infertility treatment, sex becomes like a chore. It's not passionate. It's more like a factory line. Get it done and go. And you lose that passion and that intimacy and that connection after a certain extent. So I love to help couples bring that together, and certainly individuals too that are struggling internally with that.
Thank you so much for sharing about yourself and your own journey, Kimberly. And I think it's so important for many women who are on this journey around infertility and loss to have a therapist to support with that live-in experience and to truly understand about the process and the loss, and how do you be hopeful and continue to be throughout that process as well too can be really challenging. And as well to consider the partners, right? Spouses
Absolutely.
through this journey as well too. When you mentioned working with families, I think sometimes there's less services there as well too, and how it affects both people involved. So I was wondering if you could touch on infertility and miscarriage and how it may affect mental health
Oh my
during the,
gosh,
the process.
absolutely. So definitely. So yeah, as you said, it impacts both people in the relationship. The guys often feel like they cannot communicate. I'm assuming this is a heterosexual couple. Let me highlight that, because a lot infertility work does work around heterosexual couples, just because oftentimes it's 12 months. The defining thing of infertility, for one, is 12 months or more of trying to actively conceive and not having a pregnancy. Naturally, heterosexual couples are part of that. And then if you're over the age of 35, then it is 6 months because our eggs dwindle, and whatnot. So I just want to clarify that I'm not trying to dismiss same-sex couples or anything like that. Obviously, women can struggle with infertility with like the person trying to have like IUIs or something along those lines with insemination. Sometimes it doesn't work because they have their own underlying health issues, and I don't want to dismiss them. But I'm going to talk for the purpose of this for heterosexual couples for right now. I am more than happy to go down the same sex route in a few minutes. But so that on the heterosexual, so the guys often feel like they cannot communicate to their spouses or significant others, partners, just because they feel like, wow, they're going through all these fertility treatments. They're putting all these shots, all these drugs into their bodies. They're experiencing all these hormonal fluctuations with moodiness. We're talking hot flashes, or even where like if they're doing shots, sometimes those areas get really red and irritated and they hurt. They hurt and they have lots of bruising. And so they can visibly see all these wounds that the person's experiencing. That's just externally, not even internally. And so a lot of times the males often feel like, wow, my problems in this don't even compete with what the female is going through. So a lot of times males often hold it inside themselves, and though they're part of the journey and they are 100% part of that team, because it does take two to have a baby. But they often are the ones that don't seek out therapy services themselves, just because like, well, I cannot compete with this. And so they end up holding a lot internally as well. And then their mental health starts to get really sour because they feel like they'd be a burden to their partner if they were to communicate how distressed they are and make them feel more stressed. And therefore potentially impact the fertility journey. Stress can impact, obviously, fertilization and things like that. Just with the basic human anatomy, stress 100% impacts, and anxiety 100% impacts if people can ovulate and whatnot, especially if it's at very extreme levels, because that impacts your cortisol levels. It goes in a very biological, why mental health is so detrimental in the infertility journey. But then females, especially, they're going through all these drugs and they're doing all these shots. They're taking the pills at Clomid, Letrozole, or usually, or aka Femera, if you want the brand name. Those are usually the go-to methods if time in your course by itself is not working. And so when they go into the pills, it impacts your hormones, it impacts your moodiness. Some people feel like, wow, I feel batshit crazy right now on these drugs. I feel like I am not me right now, and they gain weight. And so it impacts a lot of these times. And so it impacts self-esteem, along with how when we feel like our body just isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, and not going with the timeline. And in society, we do have a timeline, especially females. We have an internal timeline. Wow, I hit marriage and now I need the baby. But then you're having friends, family members, peers all hit that milestone, and you are not hitting that milestone. And obviously that is extremely impactful on mental health, and especially with women, where we do have a time clock, unfortunately, where egg quality is not as good over a period of time. And so when we start seeing our peers, especially when we're talking about the holiday season, we just got over New Year's, we just got over Christmas. A lot of holiday announcements are given during those times of pregnancies. And so you have all these things of people being joyous, and like kiddos opening up presents, and there's timelines and pictures. And here you are trying to have the same moment in your family, and you're unable to do that. And so obviously holidays are very triggering for people. We're about to go into Valentine's Day, right? And so that's going to be extremely impactful for loved ones that are going through infertility. And then sometimes people post like, oh, new year, new baby, and on those announcements. So it's really important as a counselor to kind of offer them that affirmation. Yeah, you have every right to be pissed off right now. And you have every right to feel upset right now, and give them that sense of validation that they are not crazy, because they feel so guilty that they feel this way towards loved ones. And that's part of being human, because the loved ones, the friends, have the thing that they want most is a family, is that extra family member, and that complete family, and that baby in their lives. And so they have every right to be upset during those times. And it's really important to, again, offer that validation, and certainly offer wonderful therapy. I myself, I love using acceptance commitment therapy. It kind of helps us embrace the suck a little bit in infertility, and embrace how impactful it is in those negative thought processes, and just have them drip off of us like raincoats. The rain is coming on there. We're getting poured with all these good news vibes and all these, especially the New Year, right? Where everyone's posting naturally all the baby announcements always come around the New Year and Christmas. And naturally, just having that kind of flow off and be able to move on with your day without spiraling outward and having a huge grief trigger and grief outbursts, which often comes with infertility. It's not just death. It's also when you get those announcements, those loved ones are having those babies. You're getting offered to go to baby showers for said loved ones. And there's nothing more traumatic than that. And then this time again, to Mother's Day in May. That's like the whole month should be avoided, it seems like, when you're going through an infertility journey, or Father's Day at that. Again, I'm not going to be sexist or anything like that. It's also very impactful for the males as well. Right. But yeah, there's so many good ways to be present for your clients that are experiencing infertility, as well as people going through infertility, and being supportive for your loved ones going through it, and certainly offer them open spaces to chat, because oftentimes people give advice that necessarily isn't helpful in one's infertility journey.
I think, you really touched on a lot of areas, whether it's the couple or a person may struggle with around feelings of guilt, shame even, right? Being angry at our own bodies as well.
Absolutely. And especially when you feel like your body is not doing what it should be doing. No one goes into an infertility journey growing up being like, hey, this is what I want. I want to go through all this, and I want to go through IVF treatment. I want to do IUIs. I want to have all these people looking at my internals, right? And being, because infertility is so invasive. So invasive. There is no privacy when you're going to see your doctor to look up for the underlying causes. So personal. at the physical level.
Definitely. I'm wondering if we can touch on how military families may be affected in struggling with infertility and your experiences there supporting families.
Absolutely. And it's so fun as a military spouse being part of people's journeys during this because people don't realize how impactful infertility is in the military community. And let me just break down. We had pretty key legislation that unfortunately was not passed in January. And I just really want to reflect on that as a military spouse myself and someone that had to pay a significant amount of money for my services. It took us 4 years to save up for IVF treatment, 4 years, because we had no coverage. And luckily, my husband and I were very proactive when we started to have issues, but most people, they don't think they have issues or they don't know they have issues. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're hit with, hey, to have a baby, you have to do this kind of treatment. Otherwise, you have like a 3% chance of having one naturally on your own or no percent. It's not happening. And so with military families, I just want to talk about like the legislation first to kind of give backdrop of kind of how impactful this is. So with key IVF legislation, it was not passed in January. The House and Senate both said, hey, we want this to be part of military packages with Tricare with their health insurance coverage. So military families do not get the same health benefits as those in Congress or government federal employees. So military members often work with government contractors right alongside them, doing the same exact role at times. Is because there's not enough military members or military members move every couple years, right? And so sometimes they just want that one stable person that's always there. And a lot of times they're retirees that did this job when they were active duty and they come back and do this role again. So even they have the IVF coverage for their families, even though they did their time they served. And VA, to extent as well, can cover packages for the VA Veterans Administration. They do have some package if you can prove it was service connected. And that can be complicated too at times. But I just really want to highlight how impactful that was to the infertility community to the infertility community that are amongst military affiliated people, either spouses, immediate family members, or the active duty member themselves. And that's certainly a slap in the face for people that obviously the military doesn't pay that much. And so, and these fertility treatments are very costly. Tricare does not cover anything. Once it goes into the assisted reproductive technology. And so that's IUIs where they inseminate, where they give you the shots, they inseminate. And then IVF, of course, is like the one that's been getting a lot of showcase recently, especially the political climate again with things. So with military families, to know how many military families are impacted by infertility. There are some statistics that say 1 in 4, and then there's others that say like 1 in 6. Military families do struggle with infertility and or need that assistance. So imagine all these people that don't have access to these benefits. So obviously it's very impactful to military communities. They are communities when you live on base and they have so many proactive activities for the families and family building. They're built to give you tickets to Disneyland and discounts or they even do field trips sometimes for family members. But each base has something along those lines to promote that sense of community. And so that's blasted everywhere. But at the same time, it's kind of poking fun at your internal hell when you're looking at all these fun things that the base is doing and you're not part of that. And you feel pretty excluded. And especially being a military spouse. Let's break that down. A lot of times they have to give up their career because their spouse is moving so frequently. License portability, it's not really there. They do have legislation in place that states should accept their licensure. However, some states still make it very difficult, even though it's been almost 2 years since they passed that legislation to make it accessible for military spouses to have a meaningful career However, when you move every 2 to 4 years, it's hard to establish roots and promote yourself and be able to go up the stepping stones of a business or organization, because by the time you do, it's time to move again and you have to start all over. And so a lot
Right.
of
I was
times, yeah,
also thinking about how that impacts fertility treatments when you need to have doctors
absolutely.
and specialists and be in the same area, right? Same hospital and clinic. And if you're having to move every few years, how that would also affect costs and treatment.
Absolutely. And it 100% does, because when you're moving, if you have Tricare Prime, for example, you have to get a referral from your primary care doctor on base. And at some bases, that's a little bit more accessible than others. And so some people, they have to wait weeks and weeks to even see their primary care doctor. And then other times, you can get in to see them. However, they might be like, well, I don't think you're infertile. I feel like you should be trying harder and go lose some weight and educate. Most doctors are uneducated. They do the basics, right? Infertility, it has their own reproductive endos, right? Endocrinologists. That's a big word. But reproductive endos are the ones that actively treat that, right? And however, when you're on a remote, like my husband, for example, he's in missiles. They're based on North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. Obviously, there's not that many fertility clinics. You have to drive either probably to Minneapolis or Denver. And if you're in that Montana one, you're just kind of SOL, where you don't have access to those doctors, even if your doctor did give you a referral. And so there isn't good access for fertility care for active duty families. And when you have to move every so often, you're in that, like, you have to get a new referral for your new PCM, primary care provider. And when you have to, but if you're still locked, yeah, you can move. However, not all doctors want to take Tricare. Tricare is notorious for underpaying and certainly making it very difficult, especially with the West region just in 2025. I keep hearing it's 2026 now. They recently moved to a whole different, so Tricare is split in East Side and West Side. West Side recently changed their contract as of January 1st, 2025. And some providers are going 6+ months without getting paid. So obviously they don't want to take Tricare clients for that initial testing. Luckily with military families, you can get that initial base testing with, like, okay, let's check like your AMH level, see my eggs, your egg quality. Let's do some ultrasounds to see maybe if there's some underlying issues going with that, maybe like a saline sonogram to make sure you don't have polyps or something along those lines. And then they'll come up with a course of action. Tricare does cover time to intercourse. However, once you start putting in anything with shots, going into IUIs, IVF, that is 100% not covered. Your ultrasounds are on you, and all the labs are on you at that point, along with the treatment. And so obviously it's very impactful when you have to move every couple years, because you have to start the whole process all over again, and or you have to commute to your old clinic and pay out of pocket, because chances are you won't get a referral for that, unfortunately.
Wow. So lots of additional stressors for military families.
I just pulled up a quick statistics I know is extremely high. 37% of active duty women have struggled with conceiving. Let that number sink in. So imagine their family, trying to build that family as they're serving their country, and here they don't have access to that care. It is not covered. Imagine the pitfall in that, being a service member and having that staring right at you with all the hoops. And if you're an active duty service member, you have to go to the military doctors to get those referrals. And you're certainly that you have nice, flexible leadership that will be understanding of all these medical appointments that are required for infertility treatment. More often than not, they're not. You're there for the mission. You're not there to build a family.
All these stressors affect ability as a partner to connect as a couple and intimacy. Like you said, not only does it feel like a task or chore, but when you have all these other stressors on you, it's hard to not emotionally shut down or sort of feel numb during this process, or find it difficult to connect or be present day to day.
Especially if you've gone through the motion and you finally reach that milestone where you're clinically determined as infertile, right? And that's 12 months of sex, 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 sex. And imagine that in the period window, and that's assuming you ovulate normal. Most time, or a nice chunk of the time, you do not ovulate normal. So you're trying to cover even a wider gap. And most women are fertile like between like 2 to 3 days, where they tell you to have sex during your ovulation period. However, if you have abnormal ovulations, you are probably doing the sexy sex for the whole week or something along those lines. If you're just trying to fill a bigger gap and you don't have like a reference point because you don't really know what's going on yet, because doctors traditionally won't escalate it until you reach the I am officially infertile in that window. And so imagine all that sex that you're doing that is planned, and especially when you just want to get done, and especially after like a couple months doing it, it's not fun anymore. Typically, it literally is a factory line, and a lot of couples lose that chemistry. They lose that sense of spontaneous, like being spontaneous with sex. And that's what we all kind of want. We want it to be passionate. And obviously, when you're doing it timed, you kind of lose that sense of passion over a period of time. So with couples, it's always really important to have that open communication with one another, and have that. Go to your own therapy. Please go to your own therapy and process that a nice, healthy outlet to someone that is unbiased to the situation. And then certainly chat with your partner about how a lot of times, especially like I said earlier, males, they feel really defeated. They feel like they can't talk to anyone about it. And so having that open communication with each other, and kind of if you, and trying to kind of bridge that gap of intimacy. So being really intentional touch even before sex time, right? Like giving each other hugs, holding each other's hands, because that releases that love. Like when we feel extra happy, it releases that body, like the chemistry in our bodies where we release that love. And so I always tell couples, please don't just do it during sexy time. Give each other kisses, hold each other's hands, give each other hugs, and do it at times when it's not planned, because it creates a sense of safety with one another in a time when you probably don't feel that safe and you don't feel that love, because it does become so systematic and so unpassionate when you're going through the infertility treatments. And certainly, like I said, please chat with someone. Don't sit internally, because that energy does come into the bedroom. It does come into your personal life through day-to-day activities, because infertility is something that drags on every day. You cannot escape it. It's really important for you to have that healthy outlet, and certainly have that open communication with your partner, and be very transparent with your partner on what you don't and don't like, and try things different. I know it's easier said than done when you're on that much sex, but try and do things a little bit different each time, whether it's position. They say like, oh, these primary positions are good. Just try to have fun. It's easier said than done. I know it doesn't feel fun, but try to do different positions, because when you have that much sex, it does become routine, and you need to spice it up. You need to try different things, and certainly embrace. If you're into kink, do that. 60% couples, some of them are into kink. Please engage that while you're trying to conceive. Get engaged in those sexual fantasies that you have. I know it's a taboo topic. That might be a topic for a different day, but please engage in that.
In preparing for this podcast episode today, I mean, such an important topic around the grief and mourning journey. You talked about experiencing with a person where things are at in that moment. And I was wondering about the grief and mourning journey, if there's anything else you can touch on about it.
Sure. So infertility, it's so hard to be present in the moment, because you're so hyper focused on thinking baby, future, and that hope. And the one biggest thing, because you're so fearful throughout the whole journey in infertility, so fearful, and it's such a powerful emotion. And the only thing that gets you through and step forward every day is hope. And that's a more powerful emotion. And so naturally, people are very hopeful for the situation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing all these treatments. They wouldn't be putting their bodies through hell if they didn't have that sense of hope. So to be present in the moment, I always encourage people to do those mindfulness activities. There's so many great apps like Insight Timer. I personally like to recommend the Happiness Trap and Russ Harris because I feel like he has his own website that walks you through in this beautiful English accent, mindfulness activities, and help you calm down because naturally anxiety goes hand in hand with infertility treatment. And then naturally depression comes in there too because you're constantly reflecting on the past and all the failed treatments and how your body failed. And you become like a broken record. You go down the rabbit hole with those emotions. And being really open with your partner with how you're currently feeling. I know it's easier said than done when you're so hyper-focused on future events and past events, but engaging those mindfulness activities is going to be absolutely critical for you to get those cortisol levels down with stress, and certainly to be more mindful and be more in tune of the beautiful part of being sexually active and making love with your partner or even love itself, right? Because a lot of times we lose our self-love and we lose all respect to our own bodies and our self-esteem is shattered going through infertility. But being mindful of the moment certainly helps people put on their battle armor for future outlook and future success.
Is there any other coping tools that you can share that might be helpful?
Sure. So mindfulness is huge.
Perhaps support groups or...
There's some really great Facebook groups out there, especially for a military spouse listening to this. I think it's called like Military Spouse Infertility Net or something along those lines. If you are doing any third-party reproduction, they have ethical providers that regulate all that and can provide great support networks. ASRM, the gold standard for going through infertility treatment. They have a wonderful support network of therapists and providers that specialize in Resolve is another big one that usually does have some sort of resources. And I believe PSI, Postpartum Support International, also has support groups for infertility as well to look into. And obviously reaching out to a counselor that specializes in infertility, grief and loss. Most people that go into the specialty, they somehow usually been impacted at one capacity or another. Either it's a loved one themselves. And so usually this isn't one that someone naturally just goes in because it is a little taboo topic and it's very niche. And so be able to find those providers. Sometimes you can find them on Psychology Today. Sometimes you can ask your OBGYN, who do they recommend? Because more often than not, that person's probably been in connection with those offices.
Okay, great. So yes, definitely important to make sure that the therapist has background, experience, knowledge in infertility support, grief, and it's great to seek out other medical professionals that might have referrals and support. And thank you for those resources. Why don't you touch on how therapy can help? How would a counselor be able to help someone or a couple going through infertility and with the grief? Is it, to create that safe space, offering education?
Yes. So with that, the nice part about seeing a therapist, they help you process those secondary losses, right? Where when I say secondary losses, sometimes people don't know what that means. It's when you're losing those big moments and those big milestones, right? That you want to have. So like where I give the example of Christmas, people are posting kiddos with Christmas presents, opening them. You don't have that with infertility. That's the dream to have that. And so that's a loss. Any loved ones that passed away and I like, wow, now my loved one isn't going to see me have these holiday traditions with these people. And certainly you can mourn the dream. Because sometimes infertility, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. It helps you have a nice, healthy outlet to mourn the dream that you had and not feel like a burden to family members. Because obviously, unless you've gone through infertility, more often than not, or gone through some serious losses like miscarriages or a loss of a child, stillbirth, most people don't understand those losses. And when you see a trained professional that specializes in this, they can help you process those secondary losses as well as the loss of the dream of maybe parenthood or or the access to parenthood, because it's easier said than done for others. Because again, I talked about military not covering, like the insurance Tricare not covering it, and kind of mourning the financial dream of it, even because like you want it, but you can't afford it. You can't afford the treatment to be a parent. And so it creates a really healthy outlet for people to certainly build and mourn the loss of parenthood and or mourn what's going on with their bodies at the time and all the hardship. Because again, most people don't understand the hardship that goes into fertility treatment with the impact of our hormones and how it impacts our anxiety levels. It's like pouring gas in the fire when you're on those drugs. A lot of people don't realize that. And the weight gain that comes along with some of those drugs, and family members make really offhand remarks how they're noticing these appearances, but some family member, they don't tell their family members because they're ashamed. They feel guilt. The advice that family members give, like, oh, just relax. Oh, just pray for God. It will come when it's ready. People don't want to hear that. And so it's nice to have a healthy outlet where you can process that anger towards others that are giving those unhelpful advice and not feel a sense of guilt. Because it's a nice, beautiful outlet for you that you can say what you want to say and not feel judged.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Kimberly, and discussing, again, the journey around grief and loss involving infertility, miscarriage, and how it especially impacts, military families. I was wondering, how could people reach you if they're wanting to know more information or to learn more about you and your services?
Absolutely. My practice is Crimson Cardinal Counseling. My practice website is Crimson Cardinal Counseling, one word.com. And I have my Instagram, Kimberly Cole _LPC. If anyone wants to connect or chat with me or ask any random questions, I'm more than happy. Yeah, I'm licensed in 7 states, but if you're outside of that 7 states, I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction to other providers that might have the same specialty as me. And if you have any random questions, I'm a human being and I've been through the struggle. I will happily answer whatever questions. Just know I'm not a medical professional.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate you also sharing your own journey as well.
You're very welcome. So happy to be here. And please, again, reach out if you guys have any questions.